Warning, the following video contains opinions, some of which may offend those with the personality of a filing cabinet. Remember that art is subjective and you're free to love, hate, or even feel lukewarm about it. If you can't stomach the idea of someone disagreeing with you, maybe grow up a bit. What's up guys? For my last video before I really knuckle down and hammer out the Chapter Black video essay, I wanted to do something way less strenuous and a bit more fun, but also probably pretty divisive. I'm going to rate a list of anime I've seen, some beloved, some probably a bit more obscure. I'm not going to be giving crazy detailed explanations about my reasoning for each. In fact, I'm going to try to keep it somewhat brief while conveying my main opinions before moving right along. While giving these shows ratings, I'm going to be taking the good with the bad, looking at the whole package and not just cherry picking the things I love about a show. If you want to see an in-depth analysis or review of anything on this list, let me know in the comments and I'll consider it. Also, I want to give a quick thank you to those of you who watch and or subscribe. I'm not the best or most creative channel of this type. There are plenty of other channels that do what I do, but way better. However, I enjoy doing this and I hope you guys do too. So go on ahead and abuse that subscribe button since I only seem to upload once every blood moon. Leave a like and drop a comment, even if it's just to tell me how wrong I am. All of those things force the algorithm to recommend my channel to other people. Due to the sheer length of the list of anime I've seen, which I'm sure is a small list compared to the more dedicated weebs, I had to split this into 3 videos just to make it easier on myself and not keep you all waiting. Anyways, thanks again for your eyeball minutes, and let's do what we came here to do. Wait, I lied. Before we do that, I need to toss up a few asterisks, with the first being that despite the title, I actually won't be rating every anime I've ever seen. Instead, I'm going to rate every single anime that I've completed from start to finish, or in the case of ongoing anime, ones that I'm completely up to date on. So no Sword Art Online, no Detective Conan, no One Piece, no Inuyasha, etc. Second is that I will not be rating any anime films I've seen. So none of the Studio Ghibli films, no Summer Wars, no Akira, no Sword of the Stranger, etc. I may do a separate video for that if you guys would like to see that, and if you would, let me know what your favorite anime film is so I can be sure to watch it and add it to the list. Third, ratings for an anime will be completely independent of the quality of its respective manga. I'm measuring these based solely on the entertainment value of the anime, completely independent of its source material. There are only 2 instances in which I even intend to mention the manga counterparts, but we'll get to those when we do. Fourth and finally, I want to clarify how I'm using my scale. It goes from 1 to 10, with 1 being among the worst things I've ever subjected my brain to, and 10 being perfection. That being said, a 5 on the scale means I think the show is just fine. A 5 means something is perfectly average to me, which is still watchable. People have this weird misunderstanding where anything below a 7 is trash, and I find that weird because it isn't like I'm grading these like a school teacher where everything below a 6 or a 7 is an instant L. This list isn't in any particular order, it's in the same order I wrote it down in when I was racking my brain trying to remember everything I've seen from start to finish. So without further ado, let's actually hop into this. Dragon Ball Z was the start of anime for a ton of us, myself included. It's a classic battle anime that has a lot of memorable moments and killer action, but for every moment like that, there are 2 moments of uninteresting downtime or lots and lots of screaming. Fights drag on for way too long, but we can't deny that Akira Toriyama changed the game with this one. Nostalgia probably has this a bit higher than it should be, but oh well. Dragon Ball Super honestly suffers from the same issues as DBZ, but when you tack on the added lackluster animation in the early portion of the show, 2 full arcs retreading material we've already seen, and future arcs that just kind of end in unsatisfying ways, it really drags down what could have been a marvelous return to form. The only real reason to watch Super is for the Tournament of Power, but that has plenty of its own issues too. It might genuinely be the nostalgia talking, but this is an excellent anime. The Spirit Detective arc does take some time to really pick up, but once you hit the Dark Tournament, buckle up because the intensity keeps up all the way through Chapter Black. The anime does have issues with its ending, but unlike Game of Thrones, the ending doesn't retroactively ruin everything that comes before it. The middle chunk from the Dark Tournament through Chapter Black is where the meat of the show is. Memorable characters kicking demon and ghost ass while dropping snarky one-liners. It's peak 90s anime and it's so much fun. I actually remember being creeped out by this anime when it was airing on Adult Swim. It's the kind of anime that makes you grimace at the uneasiness radiating from the screen. A lot of the intrigue of the show comes from the mystery, so I don't want to say too much about it. I'd say this firmly falls under psychological thrillers, so if you're into that kind of thing, this might be right up your alley. Fully Cool, or FLCL, depending on which camp you fall into, is kind of a bonkers anime with a beautiful art style and some dreamlike shots. It's incredibly short, but I actually think that works in its favor. This is the kind of anime I cannot see myself watching 24 episodes of. You'll either love this show for its absurdity and stylistic choices, or you'll find it obnoxious. I kind of go back and forth on it depending on what scene I'm watching, but at the very least, I think there's merit in experiencing it. Speaking of style, Samurai Champloo has this in spades, from the fluidity of its animation to the fight choreography to the goofy but wholesome turns the story could take. Mugen, Jin, and Fu play off of each other so well, and the soundtrack, arguably one of the best things about this incredible show, infuses the endeavor with hip-hop in such an organic way that it still blows my mind. This show is an absolute classic, deserving of your time. Bleach is a kind of tricky one to rate because up until recently it was essentially considered done, but with the 1000-Year Blood War officially on its way, this swung back into the ongoing category. However, I don't see the final story arc altering my score of this anime too much. Bleach has one of the most memorable art styles in the game, right up there with things like Dragon Ball and JoJo. However, the anime's low points do kind of eclipse the highs for me. The Soul Society arc is genuinely one of the best arcs in shonen history, but aside from the memorable and likable characters, lengthy filler arcs, repetitive storylines, and a lack of true character growth for Ichigo brought down an otherwise enjoyable experience. Another of the big three, Naruto, I feel has just as many things to praise as it does to criticize. I'm one of the few people I know that genuinely thinks that up to a certain point, the kid years of our main protagonist are just unbearable. There is a point in which it really clicks and starts hitting story beats I'm invested in, particularly towards the end of the Chunin exams, but if you don't care about or like Sasuke as a character, you're not really going to care about Naruto's secondary goal of saving him. It's more rewarding to see characters slowly coming to respect and care about Naruto as he grows, but that starts happening in the second half of this long story. The trajectory and growth of Naruto as both a story and character are better than Bleach, but there are fillers galore. Do yourself a favor and look up a guide on what episodes to skip. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed Season 1 and then blown away by how much more I loved Season 2. This anime is pretty short, clocking in at about 13 episodes per season, but it uses that time very wisely. You might be a bit put off by the goofy art style at first, but trust me, it's genuinely worth it. Mob is a beautifully written anime about the strengths and dangers of human emotion and the idea that being powerful doesn't make you better than anyone else. It's about the idea of working for the things you want, even if there's a shortcut to your goal. Legitimately one of my favorite anime in terms of humor, action, and emotional story beats. I have to admit, it took me ages to finally sit down and watch this because I'd been hearing mixed messages. Once I dove in myself, I was a bit put off by Asta's constant screeching, but there was enough there to keep me watching. The magic system is very cool to me. The structure of the world and the discrimination and ridicule of citizens born with little or no magic was interesting, and the structure of the magic system really allows for the characters to get creative with how they fight and how they respond to danger. Asta is certainly a character that grows on you as he develops his own skills and forges friendships with people he otherwise wouldn't. In terms of character arcs, at times it seems like only Asta goes through one. There's a running joke with Noelle that stopped being funny very early in the series, and every time she says it I die a little inside. If you're hungry for a lengthy battle anime, Black Clover might be for you. Dot Hack is basically Sword Art way before Sword Art. It's a perfectly watchable show, but the pacing really slows things down, so in a weird way, it's the best thing to watch if you're trying to fall asleep. It's not nearly as flashy as SAO, tending to focus more on the personal suffering of the characters from an emotional and philosophical point of view. Dot Hack Roots takes place sometime after Sign, and follows a character named Haseo. This one is a bit less philosophical and more character focused, although some characters like Tri-Edge won't really stand out unless you've also seen Legend of the Twilight Bracelet or played some of the games. There's more flashiness to this one probably after people realized how damn boring Sign was, but it's also not exactly something that'll knock your socks off. It still has a Sword Art feel to it based on its premise, but without the looming threat of a death game, at least not one that affects all players. This is one of those anime that really subverts your expectation in terms of execution. A satire of the superhero genre, One Punch Man still manages to have some pretty heartfelt moments alongside some genuinely stunning animation and absurdist humor. At least it does in the first season. The second season is such a massive downgrade that it honestly has me worried about the future of this series. The first season is absolutely worth watching, but the second doesn't quite feel that way. Right when things seem like they're picking up or going somewhere interesting, season 2 ends. The characters are well designed and memorable, the laughs and visual gags aren't obnoxious, and when things do get serious, it's pretty gripping to watch. This was among the first anime I watched from start to finish as it was airing on Adult Swim, back when anime was still in the process of really taking the West by storm. The mixture of science and fantasy elements immediately drew me in, and the military design of a great deal of the characters alongside how that design influenced the world itself was really cool to me. I found Edward and Alphonse to be extremely likable characters, and could honestly empathize with both their attempt to revive their mother and their journey to get their original bodies back. On its own, I really enjoy this version up until it kind of starts to go off the rails in the second half, which does lead to one of the more bonkers premises for a film in Conqueror of Shambhala. The tone is darker than its counterpart, and some scenes arguably hit harder because of that darker tone, and the added advantage of being the first iteration to put those scenes on screen. The second half of the show is what really kind of drags it down from having a higher score. So for the very few that don't know, Brotherhood is the iteration of Fullmetal Alchemist that more closely sticks to the source material, and it shows in terms of the overall narrative. It does rush through some fan favorite moments, or the tone feels a little flippant for what should be heart-wrenching scenes. For instance, if you measure both versions of the Show Tucker episode against one another, the 2003 version really sells the horror of that better. The animation quality of Brotherhood is impeccable, and the returning English cast make experiencing the true story so damn enjoyable. The additional context for things like the Truth, the Homunculi, and the Ishvalan War all culminate in a pretty satisfying conclusion to what is easily one of my favorite anime of all time. The only thing keeping it from a 10 is that it is outshined in some story beats by its 2003 counterpart in terms of tone and pacing. Scried was another Adult Swim anime that I watched as it aired, and it did the whole protagonist and antagonist yelling each other's names thing way before Naruto and Sasuke. The art style is a little on the generic side, and the story is mostly just fine, but it makes up for that with its energy. The calculated dedication of a soldier like the antagonist Ryuho makes for an interesting contrast to the brash recklessness of the protagonist Kazuma. I don't know if it'll knock your socks off or anything, but it's a pretty okay anime. I have an entire video about what makes Trigun so compelling, which you can check out on my channel, so I won't waste time singing more of its praises. I'm sure some might be surprised that I can speak so highly of it while also only giving it a 7, and while I can't necessarily point to any one thing that I genuinely dislike about the show, it is mostly carried by the character of Vash, so we don't get to spend too much meaningful time with anyone else until near the very end. The core theme of the show is great and sends a good message, but we spend so much time with Vash, who we don't even really learn that much about until near the show's conclusion, that the overall world building leaves a lot to be desired. I really enjoy how the show is drawn and stylized. It doesn't feel like a typical anime due in large part to that trait, as well as the 45-minute to an hour length of the episodes. This is kind of a double-edged sword though. Most people are used to the bite-sized runtime of an anime, and plenty of anime fans tend to binge a series, so sitting through Katanagatari can be a bit exhausting. There's also this weird habit the show has where it just skips forward or sets up an interesting conflict to come only to never show it but then tell the audience how crazy and tough the fight was. There's one character the anime really makes it seem will be the protagonist's biggest obstacle, and then nothing happens. Weird things like that alongside the runtime make this an interesting watch, but prevents it from reaching greater heights. As much as I prefer Yu Hakusho overall in terms of creations by Yoshihiro Togashi, I can't deny how enjoyable this iteration of the first few story arcs is. Specifically, this version shines the most during the York Shin arc. What I think this version excels at is the tone and the atmosphere, as well as introducing Kite at the beginning. Given the gravity of some of the situations our boys find themselves in, the 99 version really hammers home the intensity, the pain, and horror of key moments in that tangibly 90s style. Things felt grimy and dirty, matching the severity of the trial or task the boys were faced with. The enemies felt legitimately dangerous, and for a while, I genuinely understood why people liked the show so much despite Gon being an otherwise boring character. Last up on our list for part 1 is the 2011 version of Hunter x Hunter. The revival series for Hunter x Hunter left me a bit less impressed than its original in several ways, but not so much that I dropped the score a ton. My biggest gripe with this version of the show is just how much more sterile it feels when compared to its counterpart. That's partially the result of how much animation techniques have developed since the 90s, and partially the result of stylistic choices. Hunter x Hunter is an inherently colorful story, but the 99 version muted those colors a bit without washing them out entirely, which still lent itself to those intense moments. The bright colors, toothless violence, and the more generic stylization of the character designs, particularly with Kurapika, very much undermined my enjoyment of the series, especially since the 99 version covered a great deal of the material that's present in the 2011 version. Why would I watch an inferior version of Hunter x Hunter when I can watch the 99 series and its OVAs, then just skip right into the reboot's Chimera Ant arc, which is arguably the best arc of that show anyway? Well, that's it for part 1 of this series. There are still 40 other shows to talk about, so if you haven't seen your favorite anime just yet, it might be coming up in parts 2 or 3. If it doesn't show up at all, feel free to recommend it for me to watch. I should have part 2 up in the next week or so, depending on traffic, but until then, feel free to yell at me in the comments or try to predict what will show up and what rating I'll give it. I'm curious to see if anyone thinks the same, and it'll give me a good barometer of how many people might be mad later. At any rate, take care of yourselves and others, and as always, thanks for watching.